Well, it's a very stormy afternoon, and I've spent about the past 3.5 hours or so having a jolly good clean up here at the cottage. And as you can see, my stove is shining. So I got the blackener out and I give it a good old blacking up and then a good old polish, and so it's looking fab. And I've dusted and I've cleaned and I've swept the floors, moved the sofas. Just show you. Took the covers off the sofas, given them a good shake. This one I've changed. And so on and so forth. Mindful of a lot of people today, and a lot of situations today. So I've lit my candles and been mindful of that and thoughtful. There's another bit of a storm coming in. It's sort of coming and going, waxing and waning a bit. I'm definitely planting my garlic today. And I've also got some onions here in a bag, which I'm going to be planting today. And I may even begin to plant some of the potatoes. I'm not sure. It just depends really on how that weather system out there keeps going. But anyway, what I really wanted to share with you, which is absolutely fascinating. Now, I think I've shared the story with you before, but this is now in a completely different context. Because as I'm working, whether it's in the cottage or out there on the land, I'm continually thinking about aspects of my next book. And as you know, I'm pulling it all together. I have to have it to the editor and the proofreader by April. So it's quite important that I really get going on this. But as you know, if you know me at all, you know that I'm very good at multitasking. I like to work physically, and that frees my mind up to go on these little explorations of whatever it is I'm involved in or writing about or thinking about. So anyway, I took up my Celtic miscellany. This is a very old book. I think it's long since out of print. Look, it was originally 80 pence. But it's probably the most fascinating book, contemporary book anyway, that I possess. And all the translations are done by Kenneth Hurlston Jackson. And of course the translating of all this material is actually pivotal, you see. Professor Kenneth Hurlston Jackson. So all this writing has been translated from the Celtic literature. I think I'll just switch off my Lyric FM, which has got a little bit dramatic now at the moment. There we go. So I was drawn back to something, a passage in here, a translation from between the 13th and the 15th century here in Ireland. And it's incredibly interesting, putting it into the context of my book. Because you see, a lot of people who aren't familiar with the Irish landscape and the remnants of what was not just a Celtic society, because the Celts come in at a point, but there were people here before then. But this great merging of wisdom, shall we say, which is referred to generally as, the Celts. And the story of the fairies has been oversimplified in modern literature. The fairies are seen as elemental forces which exist outside of our realm, and occasionally we get the chance to see them or experience them, or sometimes to even converse with them. But from my experiences over the past 15, coming up to 15 years here at Bealtaine Cottage, and working very, very closely with the land, very closely with the energies, perhaps more closely than a lot of people who talk about these things. What I talk about comes from my own experiences. And I often thought that what was happening on this land here was happening alongside many, many other realms, many other worlds. And within that then came the whole issue of timelessness. And there is a timelessness factor which is very important, because what I've experienced here assures me that time in itself, as we know it, doesn't exist. That what there is a complete timelessness where we dip in and out and in and out of all eras, of all realms, of all worlds. And what stops most people from experiencing that is fear. Well, living on my own these past 15 years, in the middle of the Irish countryside, which gets incredibly dark at night, a darkness like no other, I've forgotten what fear is. It very rarely crossed my mind. And so I'm more embracing, I'm more open to the experience of timelessness. But reading this, let me just walk through to the kitchen and put my coffee on the stove, because it's just going to end up being cold. So I'll just pop it on the stove. My kettle boiling away there. So, again, very tuned in to energies. I was drawn towards this book again today, and drawn towards page 165, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to read the little note that pertains to it at the back of the book, because of course this is very much an academic book, and you can see, look, it's very sepia around the edges now. So this little story 138 in a chapter called Celtic Magic. There's various chapters in this book in order to put in some coherent fashion all the translations. So obviously magic is something that for us is inexplicable. Well, for many of us, inexplicable. I see it as much a force as the air I breathe. But this little story, to me, speaks very clearly of an encounter with people not from this earth and not from this time realm. And that's as much as I'll say on that. Which is all part of what I'm writing about. It's called the airship. One day, the monks of Clonmacnoise were holding a meeting on the floor of the church, and as they were at their deliberations, there they saw a ship sailing over them in the air, going as if it were on the sea. Now I'm stopping there because the people of this era, which is 14th to 15th century, were describing what they saw in their own knowledge that pertained to them at that time. So going as if it were on the sea is a very interesting way of explaining it. When the crew of the ship saw the meeting and the inhabited place below them, they dropped anchor, and the anchor came right down onto the floor of the church, and the priests seized it. Again, they're describing in their own wisdom at that time and their own experience what they saw, and they're using words to try to explain what they saw. So anchor is a very interesting word. A man came down out of the ship after the anchor, and he was swimming as if he were in the water, till he reached the anchor, and they were dragging him down. Again, that's very interesting. Swimming through the air as if he were in the water. And these are the monks and the priests explaining in their own terms what they saw. "For God's sake, let me go," said he, "for you are drowning me." Then he left them swimming in the air as before, taking his anchor with him. So I'll just read that last paragraph, or part of it. "A man came down out of the ship after the anchor, and he was swimming as if he were in the water, till he reached the anchor, and they were dragging him down then. 'For God's sake, let me go,' said he, 'for you are drowning me.' Then he left them, swimming in the air as before, taking his anchor with him." Now, there's a note there, which brings me to the notes at the back. And this is very interesting as well, because it turns it from an anecdotal story into something with a little bit more confirmation to it. Okay, so it's 138. K. Meyer, Anecdota from Irish Manuscripts. 3, see number 24, page 8 to 9. Okay. In the 13th century, Norse Speculum Regale, the same tale is told, likewise as having happened at Clonmacnoise. Cf. Eru 412F. So there is a certain amount of confirmation of that story, because of course the Norse Speculum Regale is a book which will which holds history in the form of stories, because of course that's how people told events of the day. They put them into stories. Stories are remembered. They're easy to remember. So that makes me think very clearly that the whole notion of the other world is much bigger than just the fairy stories. The fairy stories are part of the experiences of the people at that time. And I think that people were much more open to embracing events that they couldn't explain. I think there was less fear in those days. I think fear-mongering has become progressively worse over the centuries and over the millennia, because the powers that be realise that to instill fear in people is the best way to control them. Now this also sheds totally different light on what I saw in the tunnel years ago when my mother was alive. And it also puts the whole notion of the other world into a far bigger picture, far, far bigger than what we are open to experiencing. And you see, that's the key word, open. Most of us are closed. So on that note, I'm going to leave you, get back to my coffee, get back to my writing. I thought I'd just share that little window into how this book is dare I say the word evolving? Yeah, I think evolving. I think that's a pretty good verb to use, because it's certainly not static, and it's only a tiny part of the whole story. So, blessings to you all, and have a wonderful afternoon, and I shall speak with you soon. Don't forget the links to the Bealtaine Cottage Press are underneath this video, and if you want to order a book or the other things which are on the press, that would be fabulous. Blessings to you all.